Welcome everyone back to the Real News Network. I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore. Joining us now to discuss a bunch of stuff related to black politics and beyond, from reparations to the 2016 presidential elections, and maybe even a little bit about Beyonce and more, are two extremely thoughtful and provocative guests. First, she is a former congressional aide to Barbara Boxer. She is a political writer and founder of BreakingBrown.com, and that's Yvette Carnell. Welcome, Yvette, to the Real News. Also joining us is columnist with BlackAgendaReport.com, whose work and interviews have appeared everywhere from RT to Alternate, is Pascal Robert. Welcome, Pascal, to the Real News.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
So again, wanted to get to a lot of different things as much as possible with the both of you in the time that we have. Yvette, if we could start with you, and with this particular question, you have made it clear for some time now that you don't think that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And I'm just wondering if last night's news of his New Hampshire victory and his tough showing in Iowa have changed any of that for you.
Well, I think it does make it tougher. I think this shows me that this is a tougher road going forward. Putting those kinds of points on the board lets me know that this is going to be a tougher road for Hillary Clinton. I don't think she necessarily anticipated this, but I still would not. We have a long way to go. So I still wouldn't count Team Clinton out at this point. I think the wind is blowing in the direction of Bernie Sanders, but it's too early for me to say, it looks like Sanders is going to be the nominee. There's too much invested in it right now for me to say that.
But do you support his campaign? Where are you on his campaign and in general with supporting mainstream dominant electoral politics at this point?
Well, I haven't supported any candidate, and I haven't supported Bernie Sanders either, partly because of the way I view the political landscape. I view the political landscape, the American political landscape, is already captured by financial interests. And I view, most anyone, unless people actually sort of rebel and get involved in movement politics, I don't see any particular candidate doing something to materially benefit the people in this country, especially poor people. Without something like that happening. So I haven't come out in favor of Bernie Sanders for that reason, not because of him in terms of how I see him as an individual candidate, but in terms of how I view the political landscape.
Do you think there's value in supporting alternative parties or the building of alternative parties as a potential eventual opposition?
I think so. I think there is a value in supporting, I know people who support the Green Party. I think in other parties, I think there is a value in that. But let me be honest, I think there's a value right now in some people who are supporting Bernie Sanders. I think there's a value in what Bernie Sanders is bringing to this conversation.
Pascal Robert, let me ask you the same question, starting with your thoughts on Bernie's victory last night in New Hampshire. And I wanted to say on air that we want to have a regular segment with you just so we can call it the Robert Report here at the Real News. But give me your thoughts and please feel free to respond to anything that you heard from Yvette.
Once again, thanks for having me, Jared. I think that Sanders' victory in New Hampshire yesterday was definitely something that was significant, not so much because he won, because it was expected that he won, but he won by over a 20-point margin, which was pretty shocking. I think it was very much devastating to the Clinton machine that he won with such numbers. I think that the fact that he tied her in Iowa, and as a matter of fact, according to some numbers, he may have beaten her, but due to some shenanigans, he basically ended up in a tie. Would have been even better for him and set him off and running in a much more advantageous way. I also do not support the Sanders campaign, but somewhat maybe for different reasons than Yvette is that I do not support the Sanders campaign because his foreign policy to me does not seem to be a deviant from the traditional American imperialist kind of global hegemonic worldview that I see most American presidents sharing. And for me, someone who is not only born and raised in the U.S. but of Haitian parentage, foreign policy is a major issue to me. And for Bernie Sanders to be talking about how he views the Middle East in the same perspective as Hillary Clinton and neocons does not inure me very well to his candidacy in any way. So that, for me, as much as I may be a fan of his economic policy, the fact that his socialism stops at the water's edge basically does not really make me feel any more motivated to support him based on that reality as well. In terms of what
But just real quick, Pascal, I want you to finish that thought also, because if anyone is concerned about foreign policy and Haitian history and politics, they would also not be able to support Hillary as well, right?
Oh, no, listen, Hillary Clinton, for me, electorally, is anathema. I mean, there's no question at all. I mean, in terms of what's going on in Haiti right now, the recent president who basically had to leave under unceremonious circumstances, Michel Martelly, the only reason that puppet is in power is because Clinton and the OAS and the Obama administration put him in power and basically disregarded the electoral desires of the Haitian people to put him in power to basically extricate resources from Haiti to the international elite and the Clinton global initiatives. The Clintons have been using Haiti as their personal ATM card for over 20 years. They basically there was an article that came out called The King and Queen of Haiti, talking about Bill and Hillary Clinton. So it's ironic to me that a country that is perceived to be so poor in the Western Hemisphere. Why is it that the most significant democratic power couple of American history is so interested in being entangled in a country that seems to be so poor and have no economic value? Maybe it's because there are things there that have economic value. So for me, in terms of the Clintons, there was no question at all that Hillary Clinton and her political family, to me, are a non-starter. And before we even get to just Haiti, I question the fact that now African Americans are being considered as Hillary Clinton's firewall. I do not know how anyone who could be a serious student of American political history, or even if you're not a serious student of American political history, how anyone in their right mind in the black community could actually support a Clinton presidency when, in my opinion, and I've said this publicly, there is no president in the post-civil rights history, perhaps even going back to Woodrow Wilson, that has done more damage to black people than Bill Clinton, from deregulating finance capital and causing the subprime mortgage crisis that extricated more black wealth than perhaps any time in modern history, than putting more black men in prison than any president in the post-civil rights history of the country, by scapegoating poor black women with welfare reform, by running a racist campaign in '92, basically premised on separating the Democratic Party from the issues of the black community. The whole rise of the Clinton candidacy. There's a great article that was in, I think, in Us. It was a publication that says how the Clintons, the Clinton political fortune started up based on white supremacy. The whole rise of the Clintons as a political enterprise, as the mainstay of the Democratic Party, was based on creating the DLC to alienate blacks and progressive issues, particularly in the wake of Jesse Jackson beating Al Gore in the South Carolina primary, I think in '84. That is the crucible within which the Clintons come to their rise in power. And for people to now be saying that the black community are the Clintons' firewall in the face of that history, and I'll say it again, I do not believe there has been a president that has caused more damage to black America than Bill Clinton since perhaps Woodrow Wilson, and I will stand by that comment. To me, it's an egregious political malpractice on the part of African-American elites and the African-American community overall.
So just very quickly, before we go back to Yvette, where are you on the issue of alternative party building in terms of electoral politics?
I think that crushing the two-party bourgeois elite system is crucial. Third-party alternatives are the way to go. I do support the Green Party. I think that finding some way to get people of political ideology and economic interest to basically abandon the two-party system and form alternative, third and fourth party options. The more parties, the better. The larger numbers, the better, and destroy the hegemonic control of the two wings of the same vulture is crucial.
So Yvette, between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Bernie Sanders, we've heard more conversation about reparations, it seems, in the last couple of months than we have in a long time. Where are you on this, and how does the issue of reparations for you dovetail with broader issues of race and class?
Well, listen, I would tell anyone that I am in favor of reparations, but reparations for me looks a lot like what Bernie Sanders defined. Reparations for me is massive investment in poor communities. And for me, the whole problem with Ta-Nehisi Coates and what he did to me was really intellectually bankrupt, because what he's asking black people to do is follow this kind of identity politics, this kind of black identity politics, and everything has to be about us being black people as opposed to everything being about us being poor people and disproportionately poor. And he wants us to follow down that road, which really is a road to nowhere. It leads to a goose egg. The most interesting thing to me about what Ta-Nehisi Coates said in terms of how he defined reparations is that he never really defined reparations. And when you ask him about, hey, what does reparations look like and what is it supposed to be? He says, well, I don't have all the answers. Well, what you really don't have is an argument. You haven't defined reparations for yourself, but you're telling me that what Bernie Sanders has here doesn't go far enough. And I would ask, like he says, he said in a more recent piece, he says, Black people have more concentrated poverty. Black people are even more poor than white people, than white poor people. That's who we are. Well, that's true. But that really guts his case, because if you really know how poor we are as Black people, then you know that, okay, cutting us a check ain't gonna get it. And what we need is real infrastructure and real investment from the government. Everything from healthcare, everything from free college education. I mean, when you look at Flint, Michigan right now, that's just perfect for me. You can't give Black people a check for Flint and say, okay, just deal with your stuff. This is something that's going to take massive investment from the government to fix. And so the real intellectually bankrupt part of Coates' argument is that he doesn't define an argument for himself other than say, you know what, Black people are really, really poor. And, socialism doesn't go far enough. This sort of socialism stuff doesn't go far enough. Well, that's really not good in terms of a salient argument, is it? By saying that this doesn't go far enough. It goes very far, and you haven't defined how it should go further. The only thing you've really said, and the only thing Ta-Nehisi Coates has said is, he says that this sort of socialist politics does not vanquish racism. Those were his words. Well, my response would be, nothing vanquishes racism. And we shouldn't be concerned with vanquishing racism. I'm not concerned whether or not the white guy across town loves Black people or whether he hates Black people. What I'm concerned with is the material consequence of racism. And the only way to help alleviate or ameliorate those consequences is through massive public investment that looks a lot like what Sanders is talking about.
So, Pascal, is that where you, a moment ago, were talking about the socialism of Bernie Sanders ending at water's edge, as opposed to, simply put, the differences rather between revolutionary and democratic socialism? Wouldn't a full-blown socialist project in many ways alleviate, as Yvette was saying, the concerns over the material treatment or the material impact on Black people of white supremacy and capitalism?
Well, I think that the biggest problem that I have with Coates' piece is not even so much him challenging Bernie Sanders for him not supporting reparations. I didn't have a problem with that per se. I think that's fine. I wish that he would have been more unanimous in terms of challenging Clinton and Obama for not supporting reparations as well. But to me, the most offensive part of what Coates was doing is that he basically was challenging the value of socialism as an economic project to Black people in America. And for me, someone who considers myself a student and an acolyte of the Black radical left, I was like, well, what exactly is Ta-Nehisi? Is he basically throwing cold water on the work of Amilcar Cabral, Thomas Sankara, of the Cubans who helped, apartheid come to its end in South Africa, Patrice Lumumba. I mean, the way he was trying to frame socialism as if this thing that has no utility for Black people, to me, flies in the face of the fact that we have an over century-long tradition of radical Black activists from the Black Panther Party, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, the Colored Farmers Alliance, the Black communists of the early 20th century, Paul Robeson and Ian Du Bois, who use forms of anti-capitalism ranging from various types of socialism to challenge capitalism, which is premised on a requirement of white supremacy and racism. And for him to basically say, well, socialism, which is a project that has been international socialism that has been completely demonized, gutted, and destroyed by the international imperialist arm of the United States and the Western world, and the project has obviously not been able to complete its job in ending the evils of racism, white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, sexism, and all those other things. And for him to say, well, it can't really fix the problem. I said, well, maybe one of the reasons it can't fix the problem is because anytime someone tries to present it, someone like Coates says, well, it's never going to work. It's never going to work because the international resources of global finance capitalism have always tried to ground any type of socialist international solidarity to challenge the way in which global imperialism worked to the detriment of people of color around the world. They usually work to ground those forces to powder. And for Coates to make socialism seem like something that's this kind of alien, fruit of the radical left, that really serves Black people no good in the face of, people like, Kwame Ture, so Stokely Carmichael, and going back all those years, the fact that, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King spent their lives fighting racism, but it wasn't until they challenged capitalism, talking about socialism, that they died. So for me, for Coates to make these broad sweeping analysis of the futility of anti-capitalist materialist analysis to Black people is a major, major disrespect to the Black radical tradition. And I wish I saw more brothers who are in line with that tradition challenge Coates on those terms. In terms of what Bernie Sanders offers as socialism as a means of ameliorating the racial disparities that we have in the United States, I definitely think there's no question. But the bottom line is that when we're talking about reparations, we're still talking about a material allocations of either capital, i.e. money, or resources. So I would like to have Ta-Nehisi Coates actually explain to me, how does he think in a system of global finance capitalism does giving, say, every black person in America even $1 million apiece for reparations, do you think that's going to end racism and white supremacy in the system of global finance capitalism that exists in the world today? Are you serious? The Chinese right now, as a country of its magnitude, are wrestling with global finance capital. So you think that giving 42 million black people $1 million apiece is going to end white supremacy and racism in the world today in the way in which the international tentacles of finance capitalism work? Because you are saying that reparations is the essential tool in fighting white supremacy. So what exactly is going to stop those economic resources from being recirculated back into the global economy that's controlled by mostly Europeans anyway? And I think that Coates fails to make express that argument as to how exactly does reparations end racism and white supremacy. Now, do I believe that reparations is morally sound on its face, that there was an extraction of wealth caused by slavery, Jim Crow to African Americans? There's no question about that. Absolutely. There's no question. For me, it's a matter of practicality. If you're going to suggest it, suggest a way to get it. If you're just talking about getting it without suggesting it, a way to get it, to me, you're just kind of, you're selling wolf tickets.
Well,
so.
Unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, we're unfortunately going to have to wrap this conversation up. But before we go, I mentioned it in the intro. Pascal has said off the air that he didn't really have that much to say on the subject. But I can't let it go without asking you, Yvette, the Beyonce, as Saturday Night Live once said, really got after me yesterday for a comment I made or a meme I created. What are your thoughts, if you have any, on Beyonce's presentation as extending or paying homage to the Black Panther Party during her most recent performance in the Super Bowl with her new video, Formation?
Well, listen, my perspective on the whole Beyonce thing, and people were like, "Oh, she's pandering, Beyonce's pandering," and I said, "Listen, isn't that what capitalism does? Isn't that what capitalism does? Isn't that what capitalists do? They co-opt something that's important to you and build a product around it." Right. So what she is reflecting back to us, though, is that this is what's hot in the streets. This is what is important to Black people right now. Black people are concerned about, Black people being shot in the streets. We're concerned about, racial profiling. We're concerned about the police. But what she's doing is wrapping that up in a package neatly and presenting it to people who don't know any better as revolution. What Beyonce is doing is not revolution. She's selling a product. But I think there is something to be taken from that product in terms of there is something to be taken from that performance in the sense of it's getting back to them, that this is something that's important to us. It's just like I said about Nike. Somebody said, well, Beyonce's pandering. I said, well, capitalists pander. Nike, when Nike said just do it, do you really think they were concerned about your workout and they were really trying to make a product to make your workout better? No, they were building a product around something that's important to you. And so I think this should tell people, real activists in the street, I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter, that, hey, what you're doing is what we're doing is, having an impact. What writers are doing in terms of putting focus on these sorts of things. These things are having an impact. That's the only kind of semi-positive takeaway I can have away from it. But no, there's nothing revolutionary. There's nothing revolutionary that's about that video. There's nothing revolutionary about that performance. That doesn't mean that it's not a weather vane for me.
Yvette Carnell, Pascal Robert, I can't wait till we do this again. Thank you both very much for joining us here at The Real News.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for joining us at The Real News Network. Again, for all involved, I'm Jared Ball here in Baltimore saying, as Fred Hampton used to say, to you we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind.